How the hell do you take hours or days of footage and shape that into a 10-minute documentary? Today, I want to talk about 6 lessons that will guide you through the messy and confusing process of editing a short documentary. These aren't just gimmicky editing techniques, these are editing principles. They're the thoughts and questions that I'm asking myself as I'm trying to figure out how to take all of this footage and sculpt it into a film that's impactful and memorable. I'm Mark Johansson. I'm a working documentary editor, and over the past 8 years, I've edited everything from short documentaries to commercials, a TV series, and even a feature doc. So if you're struggling to edit your first 10-minute documentary, this video is for you. The hardest part about making a documentary is going from having nothing to creating just something, anything, even if it's a bad version of your film. Creatively, it's so much easier to take something bad that already exists and figure out how to refine that into something great. I mean, just think about how much easier it is to give feedback on someone else's film than it is to make your own film. So the first step when it comes to editing a short doc is to make a version 0 of your film. Because when you're staring at a blank timeline, the reason why you feel so anxious is because your film only exists in your head. And so long as it exists in your head, it's perfect. But the moment you start actually editing, start digging into your footage and putting it on a timeline, it's never going to live up to the bar you've set in your head. So the best way to get beyond that blank timeline anxiety is to just accept that you're going to make something bad and get on with it. The version 0 of your film is a rough cut that's way too long, it's boring, all of your transitions and music are all rough in spots, and it's objectively a bad version of your film. But that's what we want. The goal at this stage isn't to make anything great. It's just to make something exist. It takes all of the pressure away that you're putting on yourself to try and make something that's great out of the gates. That perfectionism can be paralyzing. Once you start editing and you're making these decisions quickly and not worrying about them being the perfect choice, you start to gain confidence that you're actually making progress on this project. And this builds momentum. And when it comes to finishing big projects like documentaries, momentum is everything. The best part about all of this is that this version that you have sitting in front of you, the version 0, is the worst version of your film. It's only uphill from here. When you're beginning, you often think that the audience needs to know every single little detail about your story. But the reality is you have 10 minutes to make this character's story as interesting as possible. As you're editing your short doc, you need to be constantly asking yourself, what is the one thing that I want this documentary to say to my audience? Then you need to go through and ruthlessly cut out anything that doesn't serve this goal. This is what it looks like in practice. A couple years ago, I edited a film called The Deborah Effect, which follows our main character, Deborah, who is an avid mountain biker who got into a car crash where she suffered from a severe brain injury. The documentary explores how this car crash influenced Deborah's life and how she used her passion for mountain biking in the process of healing and finding herself again. The one sentence that summarizes this entire film was that if we commit to finding joy in the moment, no matter how small, we can overcome anything. Because the film only focuses on this transformation, on finding joy after a traumatic event, we're able to cut out so many details about Deborah's life that don't serve the goal of telling this story. We don't need to know about her childhood. We don't need to know where she's riding her mountain bike. We don't need to know what she does for a living. All we need to know is what she was like before the car crash, what she was like immediately after, and where she's at now. Short documentaries are a snapshot of someone's life. They're not a full history. And when you try and take every single detail from your character's life and cram it into 10 minutes, you're actually diluting your story. The audience is getting hit with way too much information, and they have no way of parsing what's actually important because you, as the editor, don't even know what's important. Not everyone is going to like your documentary. And though that sounds harsh, When you actually really think about that and consider what it means, it becomes a huge advantage. If we look at the Deborah effect, for example, there's different types of people that like to watch mountain biking films. There's people that want to see action. They want to see the sickest, raddest riding. They want to see sick cinematography. They want it to have an awesome soundtrack. Basically, they're watching mountain bike films to get them amped up to go ride their mountain bike. But then there's also a section of people who like to ride mountain bikes that are more casual, that enjoy watching films about people that they can relate to. Someone that might remind them of one of their friends that they like to go ride with. They feel inspired by getting to know interesting people, and as a result, those interesting people make them want to get out and ride. These two audiences want something drastically different out of the film they're about to watch, and it's pretty much impossible to try and satisfy both of them within the span of 10 minutes. When you try to please everyone with your film, you end up cramming a bunch into 10 minutes, and what ends up happening is you dilute the good stuff. Your really emotional, powerful moments or your really rad action doesn't have enough time to really make an impact on your audience, and instead it's just weakened by a bunch of other stuff that's trying to appease everyone else. If you can think of a specific type of person that this film is for, when that type of person watches your documentary, it's going to resonate with them deep down. And that's what makes documentaries impactful. That's what makes your film memorable. If you're not making a documentary about a famous person, or if you yourself are not well known within the filmmaking world, no one cares about your documentary. This is why for short documentaries, it's incredibly important to front load your film with gold. Odds are you already know what the best part of your documentary is, and you may be tempted to save that so that you can tease it and draw the tension out so that it lands the best at the climax of the film. But if the audience doesn't make it through the first 30 seconds of your film, then they're never going to see that interesting moment anyways. The important part is that the first 30 seconds of your film give us a reason to stick around. It piques our curiosity. It raises questions that we need answers to, or maybe it's just simply a really cool moment. So don't start your film by trying to develop your character, by talking about their childhood, or by setting the scene with the city that they're from and a bunch of establishers or anything like that, because that's not what's going to make us care. You need to hit the audience with something fascinating right off the get-go. Here's an example from a short doc called Slow Mo, and it's one of New York Times' most viewed op docs on their channel. Here's the very first shot of the film, and it's paired with this line of dialogue. Before Slow Mo, I became a typical institutionalized, educated Western man. Within that first 5 seconds of the documentary, it's already raised 3 questions in my head. Who is Slow Mo, and why does he have that nickname? What does he mean by an institutionalized, educated Western man? And if he's no longer that, then what is he now? And the third is, what's up with the rollerblading? They could have opened up this documentary with his background, his history of working in corporate America in cubicles in a suit and tie. But a guy rollerblading in slow motion, shot on a slow motion camera on a beach, that's a way more unique premise. And once we're hooked, it then gives them the opportunity to then tell us his backstory. Now you've got the audience hooked within the first 30 seconds. They've bought in and they're ready to watch the rest of your documentary. But how do you fill up the next 9.5 minutes? And how do you keep the audience engaged throughout your film so they actually make it to the end? The key is to create contrast. And there are several ways you can create contrast within your edit. Contrast through pacing. So whether the editing is really quick cuts, or maybe it's slower shots that are held for a longer period of time. Contrast of emotion. So for example, happiness versus sadness, or maybe anger and frustration versus release and relaxation. And then contrast in theme. So for example, heartbreak versus finding love. When we don't actively try to find ways to introduce contrast into our story, then the audience's mind starts to wander and they start thinking about their to-do list or that weird thing they said today. And the moment that they're thinking their own thoughts, they're no longer invested in your film fully. So what we need to do is we need to jolt them out of this stupor and get them focused on our film again. And the way we do this is we take two contrasting emotions or energies and put them back to back. This sharp difference between these two scenes is what's going to wake up our audience and give them new, novel information to focus on that keeps them in the story rather than in their brain. So basically, you want to go through your story and try and find these opposing feelings, these opposing energies or themes. Once you've identified opposing themes, then when you put these two scenes back to back, that drastic difference between the two is what's going to keep the audience engaged because their brain doesn't know what to expect next. This is arguably one of the most important things I've learned about editing documentaries, and that is the idea of show, don't tell. Anytime you have a chance to give the audience emotion or to expose them to new information or progress your story using visuals rather than interview dialogue, you should choose visuals 100% of the time. And there's two reasons for this. The first is that visuals are far more concise. For example, let's say you're making a documentary about a dad who's trying to achieve something, but he has a newborn who's constantly waking up all the time and he's exhausted. The tell version of this story might be a line of dialogue like, I have a 3-month-old child and he wakes up every 3 hours through the night. My wife and I are exhausted and I haven't gotten a good sleep in 3 months. Well, that was probably about 10 seconds of dialogue, but if you were to show this information rather than telling it, all you need is 3 shots. A wide of a house in darkness, a light getting flicked on and you see someone in the window, and then you cut to the dad holding his crying baby. We're able to convey all of the same information within 3 seconds rather than 10. So just with this one decision, we've saved 7 seconds of runtime. If you can do this enough over the course of your short documentary, you could save up to, say, a minute of runtime, which when you're trying to make a 10-minute doc, a minute is huge. And the second reason why show don't tell is important is that visuals can communicate subtle human emotions way more efficiently than dialogue. You might have a line of dialogue like, "Oh my God, I was so nervous. My heart was pounding. I could feel it in my chest and I started to get tunnel vision." Those are all symptoms of being nervous, but we don't really feel it when someone's describing it to us because we're still up here in our heads thinking about what they're saying. But if you show a close-up shot of someone before a big moment and their hand is trembling, that conveys so much emotion in just one shot. Everyone in their life has experienced this moment before. Everyone has been so nervous that their hands been shaking. When we can see someone going through something, those mirror neurons in our brains start to trigger and we're reminded of past memories where our hand was shaking. We're no longer processing someone's words and using the language part of our brain. When we see someone's hand shaking like that, the audience member goes from passively watching something to feeling along with your character. And those are the types of films that stick with us. And that's what's going to make it memorable for them. So there you have it. 6 principles that I like to keep in my mind while I'm trying to edit short documentaries. I can guarantee that if you apply some of these philosophies to the documentary that you're working on right now, you'll not only have an easier time trying to figure out how to make your documentary shorter and more concise, but you'll also end up with a film that is far more emotionally resonant and impactful for your audience. But if you tried applying some of these principles and you're still just lost and don't really know where to get started, check out this video here where I break down my process of how I go from raw footage sitting on a hard drive to finding the story arc for my documentaries. Anyways, that's it for me, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.